everybody to our International Committee Forum. Our topic for today is cross-cultural collaboration, and our presenter is Karen Smits. Karen Smits is an organizational anthropologist. She has a PhD and is based in the Latin America region in Sao Paulo, Brazil. And she acts as a global thinker on organizational culture and change management for Practical Thinking Group. She's also authored quite a few publications that you can look through on her website, including Practices of Collaboration in the Panama Canal Expansion Project. So this is what Karen is going to be sharing with us today, her experience on this project. So welcome to everybody on the call. If you are in an arena with a lot of background noise, feel free to mute the call, and we'll have plenty of time for questions and answers after about a 20-minute presentation by Karen. Karen is also a renowned international speaker, so she's very well versed in this presentation, and I'm very much looking forward to hearing from her. So Karen, without further ado, I'll pass it over to you.
Thank you, Dana. Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for joining our call today. I'm excited to present to you about the Panama Canal Expansion Program and my experiences there. The first slide shows, if it comes through, a picture of Panama, just to make sure that everyone remembers where this little country is located. It's in between Costa Rica and Colombia. Panama is a small country. It's only 3 million people. The capital city holds about 1 million of them, 1 million inhabitants. The canal crosses through the country from, we would say north to south, but that's not completely correct. But it goes from Colón to Panama City. The image doesn't come up very well on my end, but I hope you can see it well.
I think we're getting a
you can
signal. I can see it on my screen,
okay.
And I know Candace can see it on her screen well as well.
The slide, so you can just move. If you can move to the next slide,
okay,
I'll explain.
We're on the next slide.
Okay, I'm not yet, but I'm pretty sure it shows the pictures of, there it is, the Panama Canal in 1914 when it was opened by the Americans. It has a long history. The Panama Canal was initiated by the French. They had lots of trouble. The Americans were very happy to take over the construction of this waterway, and in 1914 they opened the canal, as you see in this picture on the left-hand side of the screen. About 100 years later, in 2014, I took this picture, and you see the difference of the size of the boats, and that's exactly why, or one of the main reasons why they decided to expand the Panama Canal, just because the boats were getting bigger. This boat here has like 1 foot on each side of the locks. So they decided to expand the Panama Canal and developed a project consisting of a program consisting of 7 projects that you see on the slide right now. In my research, I focused on the 3rd set of locks projects. That is the project in the program that was the biggest, that received the most attention, was also the most interesting in terms of intercultural collaboration, because it consisted of an organization with lots of people in this project. So if we can move to the next slide, I'll explain you the companies that were connected to this.
Okay, we're on the next slide.
I think I will. Yeah, the project organization. Here it comes. So the Panama Canal Authority is owner of the project, you could say. It's the client also for CH2M Hill, which is a big company big construction or project management company in the US. They were hired by CH2M Hill, by ACP, to help them in executing the project, mainly because Panama and Panama Canal Authority never had done a project of this size and scope. And so some of the banks that funded the project required support from a project management consultancy firm. And I have to say, I don't think it was a coincidence that they hired an American consultancy firm, because Panama Canal Authority still operates on many what they would call American standards and American processes. Some Americans from CH2M Hill, however, came and said it was very much like the Corps of Engineers way back many years ago. Anyway, that's a long story. I wanted to show you here that they hired Grupo Unidos para el Canal, the project organization GOPC, to expand to build the third set of locks project. They were actually hired to design, build, and maintain the third set of locks project, the third set of locks, the new locks. And those new locks have a bigger size. They're bigger in length, in depth, in anything. They also they operate in a different way, more advanced and innovative. And it was Grupo Unidos para el Canal that consists of 4 companies: Sacir from Spain, Impregilo from Italy, Jan de Nul from Belgium, and Cusa is a local partner from Panama. And those 4 companies form Grupo Unidos para el Canal. Good to know is that these 4 companies never worked together before. They were brought together. To operate in this project. Now, Dana already moved to the next slide, which is totally fine. It's on culture and collaboration and why we should bother about culture and collaboration. Here, the first image shows that many projects fail due to a lack of alignment, a lack of agility, and some due to a lack of execution. Alignment is a very important part. Collaboration is very important. Now, the next image, Dana, shows why organizational culture is so important. Mm-hmm. It shows that projects that achieve their original business goals, if they have organizational culture high on their agenda, 71% achieves their original business objectives. Whereas if they don't, if you don't pay attention to culture, only half, like 52% of the project obtains its original business results. It shows it's very important, and I'll explain you a little bit more on the next slide on why I think culture and collaboration is so important. Dana, are we still here?
Yes, I'm still here. Sorry, I've switched to the next slide.
Oh, okay. It's just yeah. Okay. No. Oh, yeah. Yeah. So the first reason why culture and collaboration is so important is that if we understand culture, if we understand our own culture, when I talk about culture, I talk about national cultural differences as well as organizational cultural differences and professional cultural differences. Today is not the moment to explain these 3 aspects in depth, but very important to know is that we don't only deal with national cultures when we work in an intercultural environment, but also with organizational cultures. And that's also what happened here in the Panama Canal. The Grupo Unidos para el Canal consisted of a company from Spain, Italy, and Belgium, and Panama, but also 4 companies that had never worked together before. So there were 4 organizations with 4 organizational cultures brought together in a new project. Mm-hmm. Now, what's important is that once we understand our culture, we can understand ourselves better and recognize the aspects that define who we are. Mm-hmm. Then if we understand the cultural differences of the other party, we will be less frustrated when we encounter unfamiliar behavior of people in organizations. We can move on to the last point, Dana. What I want to state here too is that if we focus on culture, we can improve collaboration in the project organization. So if we focus on culture in the organization, if we focus on the cultural differences, the cultural similarities that come together, we understand a little bit better what's going on. Now, let me give you an example of what happened in Grupo Unidos para el Canal. I only put a picture on this slide because this is recorded, but also because I don't think it's necessary to write all the quotes down. In GOPC, the Grupo Unidos para el Canal, you can move to the next slide, Dana, if you want. Okay. Grupo Unidos para el Canal, there were 4 companies working together. At some point, let's say about 7-8 months into the project, the people were working together. Dana, if you want, you can move to the next slide. Or maybe you did and I don't see it.
Okay, we're on the St. Judas Thaddeus side?
No, the other one. GOPC partnering.
Okay, we're on that slide.
Yeah, okay, I didn't see it. Yeah, now it's coming up. Thank you. So at some point there was lots of issues in the partnering in the project and among the companies working together, and that was pretty obvious and pretty clear to the clients as well, to the ACP, Panama Canal Authority. So the client, we asked at some point to the director at the time for GOPC, what about partnering? We have in the contract a paragraph on partnering. What's going on with that? Because we don't see results on the partnering efforts. And here's what the program director at that time said. He said, yeah, I wrote that paragraph. It's a beautiful paragraph. I wrote it to win the contract, but we don't have time for that. And that's and that was the response he got. The ACP got. ACP forced Grupo Unidos por el Canal to organize a partnering session because they saw the need for it, and it was written in the contract. However, what happened was that they had one session of 8 hours, one day, all key people locked up in a room, and that's what they call partnering session. You can imagine that that doesn't give the results that we were looking for when we look for partnering aspects in construction projects. What I saw, however, was that there were informal solutions to partnering. So rather than top down, there were some informal efforts coming from people on different levels of the work floor to build this collaborative relationship, because they also felt they had to collaborate, they had to combine their resources, they had to share their knowledge to obtain the results that were needed. This all happened after 10 months in the project. The first 10 months was lots of fighting, lots of conflict, lots of frustration going on. After that, some informal partnering aspects or solutions came up, and I'm showing 3 in my book. And the first one is called St. Judas Thaddeus. This person said, having worked with the US government for 25 years, I know what these guys, referring to the clients, Panama Canal Authority, are looking for. I know what their hot buttons are and what their frustration are. I know them better than they know themselves. And so a lot of times I have to say to Grupo Unidos por el Canal, pull back out. Don't do what you're planning on doing. And other times I say, yeah, go. This is a person, it's an informal bridging actor, I would say. It's a person who he didn't belong to any of the 4 companies in Grupo Unidos por el Canal, but he was hired by them because of his experience with the US. And he would call himself, or he would say that people would call him San Judeo Tadeo, which is St. Judas Thaddeus, sort of the helper, the solution to all the problems. And he would be working as a bridging actor, basically. The other, another role that I saw was the firefighter. And this person says, its claims are writing letters or solving problems. So that's my role. I guess in brackets, you could call me bombero, because I tend to have other responsibilities than just what I'm hired for. I chair the weekly staff meeting, and when I have the opportunity, I attend the weekly site meetings at the Atlantic and Pacific. I use my skills and knowledge to better the processes. So this person, and not only this person, these are examples of many persons that kind of stood up informally to bridge the gaps between the organizational culture they encountered in the workforce. Now, the last person called himself a masseur. I thought mediator was a little bit of a better word to put in my thesis. He says, my goal is to enhance the internal relations. It's strategy, you know. I'm like the masseur in this organization. Yes, I have been a good solution for the company and also for the guys, because right now things are running not as smooth as they should be, but it's running better than before. So I think I've been a good solution for them. This person was actually hired by Jan de Nul, the Belgium company, but also set into a position where he could actually bridge the gap between the cultural differences and similarities and build a relationship. He's also a person who helped a lot of people when they were in conflict. So when Sacia was fighting with people from in Bregilo, for example, when there were conflicts on processes, frustrations about what was going on, these 3 people, all of them in their different people in these roles we're helping to build a better collaborative relationship in the organization. As a solution, the outcome of my research is shown on the next slide. Mm-hmm. The outcome of my presentation is a collaborant. And this model, of course, the name comes from the words collaboration and labyrinth. This model shows practices of collaboration. These are different methods, or I use the word practices often, but you could say methods of building a collaborative relationship or not. I'll give you a brief example of, or a brief explanation of each practice. I can't go into them today, but if you can forward the slide, Dana, we can see the, we can.
Okay.
Yeah. So what conflicting conditions means is when people come to a project and they ignore the cultural habits and practices that are in place. When I talk about submarining, I talk about enacting only traditional behavior. So I saw a lot of that happening in the Panama Canal. Companies come to the project, and I've seen this in many organizations. Last week I was at a telecom organization, a totally different sector, but they're working on a big project as well. And it's basically the same, you basically see the same thing happening. People come to the project, focus on their part of the contract, focus on what they're knowledgeable about, and they tend to forget that they're actually part of a bigger project and that they're part of working together with other organizations. And since they forget that, they basically stick their head underwater, and only once they come back up to the surface, like a submarine, they see that their partners or people that they have to collaborate with have gone into different directions. Now, seeking consent moves towards trying to find common ground. However, it still tends to, people still tend to talk into us versus them kind of differences. Storytelling is this perfect method, or perfect not, but a very strong method of using stories to connect with each other. Crafting reciprocal relations moves towards understanding the need for collaboration, and synergizing is the most powerful as it shows learning from and adapting to new cultural practices. So once people get to the energizing stage, you could say, or if they enact synergizing practices, they're actually building new cultural practices and maybe even a project culture. Dana already showed it. If you see those practices from up to down, some are diminishing collaboration. I would call them diminishers, and some enforce and enhance collaboration. I call them amplifiers of collaboration. Dana, if you want to move ahead for the next slide, I'll show some recommendations.
Okay.
The outcomes of my research also showed 5 recommendations for people in the field. I call them 5 pieces of advice. Here in Latin America, they like to call it Modelo 5Ps, which is Spanish for 5P model. But there are so many models with 5Ps. These are just 5 pieces of advice. The first one is partners. My advice is to always get to know the partner very well, and also on the level of culture. So make a culture scan before you start working together, or at least once a contract is signed. So you get to know the cultural differences and similarities between your own organization and the organization you're working with. Because once you have that clear, once you have a clear idea of who you're going to work with and what their cultural values and norms are, and you have an idea of your own cultural profile, you can talk about how you're going to bridge gaps, and if you see similarities, you can enhance them. And I think that's where a lot of focus should be on enhancing the cultural similarities. Because once we've seen similarities, we can create a collaboration and we can deal with the differences that we encounter. The second P is possibilities, which is also a very powerful one, because it's very important to always remember that, to always remember and see the possibilities of cultural diversity. I think, and I strongly believe that when in a multicultural environment, we can obtain higher results than when we're working with people from the same culture, the same organizational culture, same national culture. I think collaboration is a very difficult aspect, but a very important aspect to obtain successful projects. The third P is patience. And patience refers to patience. There will always be conflicts in any intercultural environment, in any environment where people work together. There's actually research stating that it might be easier to not collaborate. However, that's hardly impossible, especially when we're talking about big construction projects. It's hard for a company or a client to just do that on its own. So here's what patience comes into mind. It's really important to remember that conflicts are inevitable. What's good, though, is that not to avoid the conflicts, but put them on the table and talk about them. Discuss the frustrations that come to mind, discuss the differences that are felt, because only then we can build on constructing a stronger form of collaborating or working together. The fourth P is philosophy, especially for projects that will take longer than 2 years, and the Panama Canal is a good example of it. It's recommended to build a project philosophy. And you start with this at the beginning of the project and continue this towards the end. And with philosophy, I actually mean building norms and values, building a project culture, really. Now, was Grupo Unidos por el Canal not the best example for it? However, the collaboration between ACP and CH2M Hill, the American company, does show some examples of building a project philosophy, making sure people have their noses in the same direction, they're focused on the same outcome, and they stand for the same values. It's not an easy task, but it's definitely worthwhile. I think it's really close towards what IPI would call partnering. Now, the last recommendation is promote intercultural collaboration. So don't only wait for informal actors to stand up and organize some activities. Don't wait for people on the work floor to develop something that would help intercultural collaboration. But from the top management, I think it's important that people see support on building a collaborative environment. And that's also what was shown in the Panama Canal expansion program between ACP and CH2M Hill, rather than between the companies in Grupo Unidos por el Canal. Yes, UPC had some activities organized, but all of those were very informal, and they also came bottom up rather than top down. And I think if we really want to promote intercultural collaboration, it should be top down as well. To finalize, I have some essentials on bridging cultural gaps on the next slide. Yep. Essentially, it's very important to be aware that cross-cultural collaboration is a key in successful project management. As the image earlier showed, that is only if we place organizational culture high on the agenda, 70% of the projects will achieve its obtaining result, will achieve its original results. So it's on the agenda. Now, recognizing these practices of collaboration from the collaborative model that I showed before is very helpful, because once you recognize them, you can act upon them. So if you see conflicts, or if you see people submarining or companies submarining, you can work with it. And you can support synergizing and building the relationships between people. Also essential is that to make partnering work, you need a structured process over the project lifecycle. It's not something, as I mentioned before, that you do in one meeting. It's not something you only do in the first week of working together. It's something that needs to be continuous. And I believe that if we place cultural...
I think we lost you, Karen, for a moment on the last part, your last sentence. Are you still there?
I'm one of the participants. I'm still here.
Okay,
so
thank you.
The speaker.
Thank you. Karen, can you hear us? Well, I think that,
It's a brief presentation.
okay, we had lost you for a minute. Can you hear us, Karen?
Yeah, I can hear you. Where did
Okay.
you lose me? Where did you lose me?
We lost you in the last closing, bridging cultural gaps to make partnering work. You need a structured process over the project life cycle. So we're now on the slide on where they can get more information.
Yeah, well, on the previous slide, but leave it because I think we will lose connection. On the previous slide, there was an image of Cirque du Soleil, and what I wanted to express with that image is that that if we want to build complex, intercultural, colorful projects together, we actually have to work together and combine our forces. Now, if you want to read more about my work in the Panama Canal Expansion Program, my book is available on Amazon. There's a list of academic and some non-academic publications available on my website. If you can't get access to the actual article, just write me an email and I'll send you the article, no problem. You can follow me on LinkedIn, on Twitter, sorry, and stay in touch. We have some time for question and answers. And on this slide, I show you the end result. On June 26th of this year, the Panama Canal opened the third Southern Locks project. And although there was lots of conflict and lots of frustration, lots of non-collaborative practices, the end result's here. And it looks beautiful. I was there a couple of weeks ago. It looks beautiful. It operates, it works. It's just a matter of waiting for the big boats to pass through. Whoever has questions, I'm here to answer them.
Thank you very much, Karen. It was a wonderful presentation. Yeah, we have plenty of time for questions and answers. So does anybody have anything they'd like to ask Karen?
I do. This is Kent. Wondering, Karen, did you have a weekly collaborative meetings, or how is the partnering implemented on a long-term project like this?
That's a good question. I was not there as a consultant. I was in a researcher role in the Panama Canal Expansion Program. So I gathered all the data when I was working at the university in Amsterdam, and I was there as a researcher. So I saw what was happening in terms of partnering, and that was as much as I told you before, very little. After that, I was asked to work on some sessions, and we did some bi-weekly sessions between the organizations. However, that was still informal and not as structured as IPI would present that. I have to admit, at that time, I didn't know IPI existed.
Yeah. That's a great
thank
question.
you.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Karen, I wanted to ask you, in terms of the construction management firm, CH2M Hill, how active a role did they play in kind of seeking to establish partnering? I know that, it was written and that the GUPC said that they didn't have time for it.
Yeah.
Did CH2M Hill, promote any kind of, formalized cross-cultural? What was their role in terms of representing ACP?
At the start, when GOPC arrived to Panama, they had no idea of the existence of CH2M Hill. So there were Americans in the meeting and Panamanians in the meeting, but they wouldn't know that these Americans were actually belonging to CH2M Hill. That became clear only a little time later. And in terms of partnering, I think they informally asked many people in GOPC to enhance relationship between them, because they were also feeling the frustrations that were going on between the people from Sasir and Pregilo, Jan de Nul and Kusa. Mm-hmm. There was no formal role for them in that collaborative relationship. In the relationship they had with ACP, they were active in building a partnering environment. not not in terms of IPI. I would say that IPI has a better structured
Process.
idea or program process on building an intercultural relationship. But they did had lots of meetings with ACP. They participated in informal and informal meetings. Actually, they started with a slogan. Let me remind myself: "One team, one mission."
Mm-hmm.
It's a slogan that was originates from when they were transferring the canal from the American ownership to Panamanian ownership in 2000. But they revitalized this slogan to again state the importance of working together among ACP and CH2M Hill. This idea came, I actually think it came from CH2M Hill in collaboration with the administrator of the canal at that time. And part of that was a big partnering program, including a new logo for the third set of locks project. So for one project, they developed a logo, and everyone working in the project received a T-shirt with that logo, and people were actually wearing that. They organized lots of activities as well related to this logo, or to this logo, related to this. Sorry, I'm distracted. Related to this intercultural collaboration and building a collaborative relationship together. So I think CH2M Hill had quite an active role in building partnering between CH2M Hill and ACP. Not so much in their contractor, which would be GUPC.
Mm-hmm.
Any doubts?
Thank you. Does anybody else have a question for Karen?
I've got another one, if you don't mind, Karen.
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay. I was just interested in what are the results after the project? Was there agreement? Was there a finalization of all the contracts, or is it ongoing? And maybe you can't speak to it. Is it ongoing in litigation or legal problems?
I can speak as much as what's in the news.
Okay, that's all I'm asking. I'm not really
In February 2014, February 2014, it appeared in the news, but this conflict was already going on for a while. There was a big conflict between Grupo Unidos por el Canal and ACP, to the extent that GUPC decided to stop the works. That had a huge impact. First of all, because it was summer in Panama, and that means 3 months of no rain, whereas the rest of the year there is rain. And you need dry time. You need dry time to construct or to dig a canal. So that was very very frustrating for ACP. ACP played it really well in terms of how they managed the media and how they made this public to the Panamanian public. So anyone in Panama would be against GUPC at that time because they stopped working on the canal, which is the project of the country. So there was a lot of pressure on GUPC to start working again. And after a push on different sides, also a financial push, they started the works again. They finished them, or they officially opened the canal on June 2016, this year. There is still a lot of conflict going on. The expectation is that they will be dealing with DBA, the dispute board, until 2018. So there's still a lot of conflict going on. New York Times wrote a big article about it. There's lots of articles about it. New York Times featured an article just before the opening of the canal. And so yes, the relationship between these companies is not one that I expect them to work together again in the future. One of the project directors said, if we all come out of this without any debt, financial debt, we've done well. And that, of course, is not the idea when they started working this project. So
Of course.
it's been a ride.
Hmm.
And you could say that they needed a lot more partnering. They should have make partnering essential in their project.
There was an interesting article in ENR also, one of the,
Yeah.
I think it was CH2M Hill who mentioned one of the leadership on the project that they wished that they had started partnering from the beginning.
Yeah.
That's in the June, one of the June issues of ENR magazine.
Yeah.
Karen,
Yeah, that's right.
Could you tell us a little bit about how to, what are some concrete steps that you can take to start to understand the different kinds of culture, the national culture, the organizational culture of the different players on a team such as this?
What I generally do in this kind of project, I work as a consultant in both construction projects and other projects. I was telling you before, I worked on a telecommunication project, and but at the moment I'm working on a merger also here in Sao Paulo. But what's generally important is to do this culture scan, to have an idea of the organizational cultures, and that includes national cultural values as well. But to know what organizational cultures are brought together in this project. So because this project organization consisting of 4 companies from 4 different national cultures carrying 4 organizational cultures, they're brought together into a new project organization. You could say that organization is a multiple culture environment. Mm-hmm. And to understand how to deal with that, it's important to understand each organizational culture and see what differences, but not only differences, also the similarities that these cultures have, so you can start building on them. Because once you have a clear cultural profile of each company, you know how they are aligned and whether and also important is their interest for participating in this project. But that's the difference, a little bit of this different aspect. You know the cultural aspects of these companies, you can work on these and you can put them on the table, and then it's just like partnering, or part of partnering, I would say, where you continuously work on how we can bridge the gaps, how we can deal with this. And it's a lot of facilitating of meetings. It's sometimes part of leadership development. It's very practical. It would be just sitting down together and talk about the values that are important of the organizations and how people will be working together. In this project, some very basic examples, for example, are how people deal with time. For some companies, to be more concrete, 2 of the Latin companies, lunchtime was a 2-hour break. There's a Belgian company involved, or at least in this Belgian company, lunch is half an hour behind your desk. Mm-hmm. So one of these aspects, so once you put these aspects on the table and you understand from each other what in this time management mean, because time in lunch is a practical example, but another example related to time is deadline. What does a deadline mean? Is a deadline an estimation of time when you have the work finished, or is a deadline the day after you have the work actually finished? It's really important to put these aspects on the table and make them as practical as needed, so you can also align the people and decide what values are, or what values or what practices are important for working together in this project, so people can actually adapt or adjust to the different cultural practices that come together. Because only that way, I think, only that way you can build a collaborative relationship. It's very important to define what does a deadline mean, what does leadership mean, how do we deal with hierarchy, for example. It's a different topic, but very important one. There's one company, for example, where people were very hierarchical company, so people were not allowed to talk or to criticize their boss. Or there's another company in this same organization where not criticizing, but discussing with your boss is expected. Now imagine coming from an organizational culture where you used to discuss with your boss, now working for a boss coming from an organizational culture who doesn't where no discussion is expected. That creates a lot of frustration and conflict in the workplace. So I believe it's very important to put these aspects on the table and find out how you can do it, and to together look for a solution. And sometimes that means adjusting for the one party, and sometimes that means adjustments for the other party.
Mm-hmm. And there is a growing need for this, I think, in mega projects, but also, here in California and throughout the U.S., there's a lot of cultural pluralities on projects, and so where speaking up is so important to issue resolution, it's important to understand what speaking up means in different cultural contexts, and where it's disrespectful in some cultures, and where and understanding that, I think, is going to help help people be able to speak up more freely.
As I mentioned before, if we understand our own culture, and if we understand how difficult it is to change from our own culture, we also understand for other people that it's difficult to change from their culture. Right. So I believe that only once we put it on the table and start talking about it and discuss it and try and fail and try again, that's how we learn. And yes, this topic receives more and more attention. I find here in Latin America, it's partnering in the first place, but also culture is a topic that's still in its infancy. But it's interesting to see how it's growing and how fast it's receiving more and more attention as well. So that's, I would say that's a positive development.
Good. Does anybody else have a question for Karen?
Yes, exactly.
I don't have a question, but I want to thank her for her presentation. This is Darlene Subtalka. I'm from the Boeing Company, and taking some notes in her website and going to look into her book. We're in the process of undertaking not a mega project, but a project that will result in a big construction project in China. And so I hear everything she's saying on the different culture and the different work, both business culture, organizational culture, and country cultures.
Mm-hmm.
That's great to hear. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, my data is on the previous slide. Dana, will you share the slides with people?
Of course. And I will send the recording for this presentation and the audio as well as the slides to everybody on the call and to anyone you'd like to share it with.
Perfect.
So do you have our? I know I sent an acceptance to the invite, and so do you have my email?
Yes, I do. I got the RSVP from you.
Thank you very much.
I'm happy
Thank
to
you.
share it with you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Would anybody else like to ask Karen something before we move on?
I'd like to ask something, Karen.
Please.
I'm wondering, could you give us an example of one of the biggest breakthroughs that the team was able to achieve because they put their expectations on the table and were able to recognize the differences between their cultures?
I'll give you an example from GUPC and then an example from ACP and CH2M Hill, because I see them as two separate groups that were working together, and both their results were different and the way they dealt with each other were very different. I have to admit that I think for GUPC, I wouldn't dare to say, and maybe I didn't see it, or maybe it wasn't out there in the last year of their collaboration, but I didn't see much much of attempts to build a collaborative relationship, especially around the time end 2013, beginning of 2014, just before they stopped the work. There was a lot of conflict, and that conflict was internally fought, but you could also notice that externally. So they would separately talk to the press. The client would receive different messages, and that was, you could say, chaos. They changed the program manager a few times, and I think not only changing the program manager, but showing that changing leadership has helped. But it's been the major part that built a collaborative relationship that was there. It was still a low level, to be honest. came from these bridging actors. So from individual people who saw the need for building a collaborative relationship and who acted as how do you call that in English? That acted as bridges, that acted as people bringing people together.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a very low level of partnering. Now,
Mm-hmm.
between ACP and CH2M Hill, I would say that was a more professional way of building a collaborative relationship. They had a lot of conflict at the beginning of their collaboration as well, for many reasons. One of them is because the contract states that CH2M Hill was not responsible. It was for anything, well, not for anything, but it was hired to teach and train Panamanian people in the project organization rather than actually being responsible and accountable for their work. Whereas CH2M Hill send a lot of what they call type A personality people to the project. So people that want to lead, want to relatively start working and be responsible for their work. Now, these people came to Panama and there they had to face the contractual agreement that states they were only hired to teach and train and advise. That created a lot of friction. But once they sat down together, and these were also a lot of talks, this is not just one meeting, they sat together and discussed and discovered that they wanted to move forward together. They started building this one team, one mission slogan. They started building, they actually had a budget reserved for partnering, and they wouldn't call it partnering, but it would be there was budget for activities. They actually set up a baseball team together. They had lots of activities. They had lots of meetings focused on working together. And I think from that moment on, those two companies actually were successful in their cultural collaboration. Does that help?
Yes, thank you. I think that is a good note to end on for today's presentation. I think it was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much, Karen. There are a lot of parallels between, what you found as a researcher on the Panama Canal Expansion Project and what we've learned in terms of projects across the world, really, who have partnered early. They've used a structured process. They've identified partnering champions, both informal and formal. They've used formal facilitation, but also relied on these informal facilitators to bridge those gaps. And so there's a lot of common lessons learned. And I think it's very useful to us as an organization to understand, how this works in mega projects, because mega projects are becoming more and more prevalent in today's society.
Yeah.
So thank you so much. And I look forward to sharing all of these slides with and the recording with everybody on the call. If you have anyone else you'd like us to share it with, please let us know. Our next virtual forum, thank you very much, Karen. Our next virtual forum is going to be on September 15th from 8 a.m. to 9 a.m., the same window of time here, Pacific. You'll be able to hear from the SFO Replacement Airport Traffic Control Tower and Integrated Facilities Project team. And it's an IPI Partnered Project of the Year award winner and also an ENR Best Project Northern California winner. So I look forward to having you all on this call and hearing some of their lessons learned on this progressive design build project. Just as a friendly reminder, IPI is collective wisdom. We rely on all of our members' stories and experiences in collaborative partnering, and we also share tools and resources. So please follow up with us if you would like any more information. We do have research. We develop new tools. We do a lot of education and presentations. We have networking opportunities and mentoring and guidance opportunities, and we also offer training on how to get your collaborative partnering teams up to speed. All of your project teams can benefit from training, and so can your executives. So reach out if you'd like more information. And here is our contact information. And as I said, thank you all very much for taking the time to be on our call. Thank you, Karen.
You're welcome.
Wonderful.
Thank you. You're welcome. It's great to have this opportunity.
Okay. Thank you much, everybody. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.